Hey everybody, War Hamster Brady here. Welcome you to a special edition of the Re-Federalist Report. Joining me today is my normal co-pilot, constitutional mentor, Douglas V. Gibbs, and a special guest today, joining us from sunny Southern California in Santa Barbara, is John B. Herrera. Thanks, gentlemen, for joining.
Hey, yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, we've been trying to get this together for a while. John is the president of Friends of the Article 5 Convention, an organization dedicated to pushing for an Article 5 convention. And coincidentally, that's our topic today. We are going to talk about an Article 5 convention of states. You guys ready to do it?
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, a bit of background. Where were we when we were living under the Articles of Confederation after the very birth of our union? And the Articles of Convention did provide a means for amending the Constitution. However, it was a little bit difficult. So in Article 13, I'm just going to read it. Every state shall abide by the determinations of the United States in Congress assembled on all questions which by this Confederation are submitted to them, and the Articles of Confederation shall be inviolably observed by every state. And the union shall be perpetual. People will note that perpetual union language did not make it into the Constitution. I bring that up because one of our ongoing topics was secession legal under the Constitution. Yes, it was. Nor shall any alteration at any time hereafter be made in any of them, unless such alteration be agreed to in Congress of the United States, and here's the key part, and be afterwards confirmed by the legislatures of every state. So what's going on is anytime under the Articles of Confederation, they were dysfunctional. They couldn't make any changes. And, well, Doug knows what state I'm going to pick on right now, don't you?
Yeah, and before you go on, I want to point out something that's earlier in that part where it says all questions which by this Confederation are submitted to them. Now, what that is that's the right to petition the government for redress of grievances, which found its way into the First Amendment. Petitioning your government was a common thing at the time, and they were expected to listen. They were expected to make decisions, but as you're getting ready to go into, that was hard to come by.
Very good. And the word every state was problematic for the Articles of Convention. And that's one of the main reasons they met in Philadelphia is this whole thing, it doesn't work. We don't have a strong enough central government. We can't make any changes because Rhode Island's going to sit out there and say, nah, I'm going to use the heckler's veto. You can't change a thing. And Rhode Island, of course, was mostly populated by smugglers and pirates. And the last thing they wanted was government.
And audience, what he's saying is in order to make any change, it wasn't a majority. It wasn't a super majority. It had to be unanimous. If just one state said, no, don't like it, it stops.
And that's a bit of a problem. So the founders, in their infinite wisdom, got together in Philadelphia and ratified the Constitution.
Oh, they didn't ratify it. They just proposed it.
Yeah, they drafted it and got ratified by the states later on. And the interesting part was they dropped that unanimity requirement. So I brought up this question to John. I'm going to address this one to John. You know, a lot of people say, especially in some of the libertarian circles, that the Constitution was treason. They did not have the right to change the Articles of Confederation. In fact, Rhode Island didn't even show up at the convention. So they're saying that was a runaway convention. Your thoughts on that, John?
Well, the Articles of Confederation remained the high law of the country during this whole process of Annapolis, then into 1787, Philadelphia, then all through the period of the Federalist Papers, all the sales pitches going around in the newspapers of why we should adopt the Constitution. And so the holdout states, before it was ratified by the states that did want to operate under the Constitution, those states were actually operating under the Articles and the Constitution. So the Articles never went away. It was only until later when all the states said, yeah, let's do this. And finally, Rhode Island, it was Rhode Island the last to
Yeah, Rhode
ratify?
Island was the last one. And
Okay.
something I'd like to add, John, if you don't mind, is all of the states agreed to have the convention. All of the states sent delegates, but the Rhode Island delegates got turned around because word got out, hey, this isn't just fixing the Articles. They're going to write a new constitution. We want nothing to do with it. They came back.
Right.
But all of them agreed to have the convention. And you're right, the Articles of Confederation was still in force until the final and until the ninth ratification vote. Then for the states that had agreed to it, the Constitution went into
Right.
Right. But even technically, then the Constitution really wasn't the law until it went into effect in 1789. So even then, even after those states had ratified, until they actually put it into effect, Congress met. And then the states that did not ratify at that point, states number 10, 11, 12, and 13, they simply did not send anybody to Congress because they hadn't agreed to join this. So they were operating partly under the Articles and partly under their own individual state constitutions.
Right.
But once they ratified and they agreed, then they became a part of it as well. So to answer the folks that say, well, it wasn't illegal, it was unanimously agreed to have a convention, and ultimately it was unanimously ratified. So the unanimous requirement was met ultimately.
Yeah, they used the language. They used that language, the perpetual union, and that's such a silly argument because had they thought when they adopted the Articles of Confederation that it was the Hotel California where you could never leave, that thing never gets ratified in the first place. And it's the same thing with the Constitution. It was never a perpetual. If you voluntarily accede to a contract, you can voluntarily secede.
And if you're not allowed to leave, is that not tyranny? And I had this conversation in one of my Constitution classes in San Juan Capistrano. Had a gentleman who used to be a communist. Actually, he's in Trevor Loudon's first film as one of the young communists, and then had changed his mind, decided that he would be not a communist anymore, but he carried a lot of these big government ideas still in his head. And he argued with me about, when we got into the voluntary union and secession is not illegal. And that's what I was saying. He said, and he says, yeah, it is illegal. And he says, and the founding fathers understood it that way because that's why they put perpetual in the Articles. And I said exactly what you said, but they didn't carry that language over to the Constitution, did they? The Constitution is not the Articles, and to use the word perpetual, meaning that it's not a voluntary union, is ridiculous. And the reason why this is important to Article 5 is this is to understand these states are not provinces in a national system. They are individual, autonomous, sovereign entities that have joined in a union, and they retained their voice. They retained their voice through the Senate. They retained their voice through the requirement of ratifying amendments. That's our proof that they are parties to the contract and they are a part of the system, and their opinion mattered. And so if it mattered for ratification, why wouldn't it matter for, say, proposing? And why is that a big deal? It's because they were voluntary members, and they had every right, if they felt the contract was being breached, and to either try to change it or to leave.
Yeah. I just want to pull this back to the idea of the Runaway Convention, because there's probably many listeners, and I know there's many people that have fixed in their mind this idea that the 1787 convention was a runaway. That's like the common myth, and that myth comes about from the John Birch Society and the Eagle Forum. Those groups have always messaged that, oh yeah, that 1787 was a runaway convention. If we have
and they say the word runaway because they want to push this idea that it was chaotic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got a great screenshot on that. One of the arguments we hear all the time is, no, what's going to happen is a bunch of leftists are going to get in there. They're going to take away our Second Amendment. So this is jumping forward, but since John segued into it, I'll go ahead and share this. Chart on the left shows the state concealed permit laws in 1980. This was one on the right's from 2024. And the big shift is all these red states now have permitless concealed carry. The trend over the last 44 years has been distinctly toward better and more open gun laws. To change the Second Amendment, which is everybody's biggest fear, but the one that gets stated the most loudly, you're going to need 3/4 of those states to say, yeah, take away our gun laws. It ain't happening, people. You do not have to worry about your Second Amendment rights going away.
Yeah, the ratification process is the guarantee again. And I hate to say this because it came from Alexander Hamilton, but Alexander Hamilton in Federalist is at 84. I think it's 84.
85.
85. Thank you.
One.
Federalist 85. Yeah. Thank you. I knew it was one of the two. Hamilton defends the Article 5 convention, and he does quite well. And he basically says, not in this exact language, because this is language we've adopted later, but that the ratification process of 3/4 of states approving anything that would come out of a convention is the failsafe.
Yes. 85. If you ever read it, it's kind of wordy, but the diamond in the rough there, it says basically Hamilton says, look, if you guys are so afraid of this new government and all these centralized powers, because there was a lot of anti-federalist papers in the broadsheets of the day. But the very final sales pitch was, if you guys are so afraid of this new government, we have the convention clause. As soon as 2/3 of the states hold up their hand and say it's time for a convention, the Congress doesn't, the national legislature doesn't have a choice. So that was the fail-safe. That was the final sales pitch to the country to say, you know, if this doesn't work out, as soon as 2/3, a mathematical, numerical, objective count, as soon as they raise their hand, we'll talk about it then.
Yeah, and like the petition clause, that ties into consent to the governed. That's what convention's all about. Consent to the governed.
Yeah. All right, so I'm going to jump into the Article 5 itself, just go through the language and bring some stuff up. But, you know, just to finalize the issue of a runaway convention, you know, this is the only tool that the founding fathers gave us to restrain a federal government that could get out of control, and we've never used it once.
It's the ultimate check. It's the ultimate check in checks and balances. It's the people saying, time out, hang on, we got problems. We need to formally discuss them. We're having informal discussion. People on Facebook and social media are having informal discussion, and comments. But the convention clause, once the convention's called, now we're in a formal discussion, and that
formal procedure in place. Yeah.
Right, and that formal discussion is going to ultimately reach mathematical consensus. That's all it does, and that consensus amongst the living today, formally, is what destroys the status quo. Is what makes anyone who's on the take or corrupt. It's what makes them start walking and talking differently. I mean, if you're on the take, a politician right now, and the call for our first federal convention goes out, you're going to start walking and talking differently because the people are coming to town and the people are coming together, and it's not a mystery as to what needs to be discussed. It's already evident. The right and the left agree on money in politics, electoral reform. So we already know once we come together, once we're allowed to formally come together, we already know where the consensus is going to go because it's obvious. Yeah, we shouldn't have $1 billion elections for public servants, etc. But that said, I do just want to underline to anyone listening that the idea of a runaway convention is a myth. It can't happen. It can't happen. So if you're listening and you've been for decades, you've always conceptualized a new convention or a convention under Article 5, if you've always conceptualized that as it might run away, it can't happen. It can't happen. Whatever's discussed has to be ratified. And to think that, back to Brady's point about the Second Amendment, to think that 7.5 out of 10 Americans are going to agree to shoot ourselves in the foot, it's in terms of practical politics, it's not going to happen.
And you know, John, people, excuse me a sec, Warhamster, and John, you know, people say this to me, same thing, Runaway, and they're going to do this, they're going to do that, and I've always said what you said, and then I'll add, and if we do have 3/4 agreement, that we have bigger problems than runaway conventions.
Well, that's what I was going to say.
If 3/4 is going to vote away your gun rights, if 3/4 is going to light the Constitution on fire like the DSA wants to, we got much bigger problems than runaway conventions.
Well, right. That's the counterpoint. That's the counter argument I was going to throw out there. We hear this sometimes. Now explain away the 16th and 17th Amendment, because we did shoot ourselves in the foot. We did give away states' rights. So,
well, that was because by that time in the progression of our history, the same moneyed forces had already begun to seep in. The first application for federal convention, I believe, was Virginia, and that was in I think 1790 something. So there the people in our government, even, you know, very shortly after ratifying the Constitution and everyone coming on board, there were already red flags for some people. And so the fact that we have done things, you know, prohibition, then we repealed, the fact that we've had some things foisted upon us is evidence that, you know, there are these forces that don't want us to have the freedoms that were won with the war for independence. And so it's a dynamic thing, you know, it's but yeah, so basically it's, you know, going back to the idea that if 3/4 of the people today did decide to torch the Constitution, we have much bigger problems, etc., like Doug's saying. But you know, there's if you are discussing things with people like you guys are, people listening to you guys, you just know clearly that 7.5 out of 10 Americans are not today, especially today, what we know, are not going to propose or attempt to ratify something that's obviously neither here nor there for what
you're saying is key. What you're saying is key, because you said from what we know. You go back to, say, the 17th Amendment, 16th Amendment, like Warhamster was referring to, and at the time, we didn't have access to information back then, and the progressive era was in full swing, and everybody was getting only what was inside the bubble. Now we live at in a time where the alternative points of views and the alternative media and all of this is out there. People are much more informed, for the good and for the bad. Some people do put on their blinders and they only want to be informed in a certain way. But the opportunity to make sure that the information is out there for everybody, to make sure that we understand the details of what's on the table, is much more prevalent in today's day and age. And as Warhamster has referred to, our age of information, it's Gutenberg 2.0, and out of it is going to come our understanding that 7.5% of the people is not going to, fall for that. Now that we are getting more information, we realize that they're lying to us and that the polls are not necessarily accurate and so on and so forth. And we know these things. And now as a society, it seems like at the moment we are beginning to act accordingly. And I think that's an advantage for Article 5.
Yeah.
So one of the real quick, John, it's
Okay,
not
yeah.
just 75% of the people to stop a bad idea. It's actually 51% of the people in only 13 states can stop a bad idea. That is the basically the defense. You only need 13 states to say no. So yeah, if we go to a convention, George Soros is going to get some of his people in there, and they're going to throw out some of the craziest ideas in history. And I doubt they even make it out of convention. But if they do, they're not going to make it through the red states.
Well, here's something really important. I do want to back up real quick. 75% approval is actually a political principle. And what it means is whatever the idea is, you have to get all of one side of the political spectrum signed on, plus at least half of the other, which 75% mathematically precludes any partisan ideas from becoming high law. It can't happen. It's impossible. So then, jumping to the idea that George Soros or the Koch brothers or whoever your boogeyman is, the idea that they're going to somehow persuade, number one, they got to persuade 2/3 of the convention delegates, right? Because the convention process is bounded by the 14th Amendment and equal protection under the law. So we can go into that later. But even at the convention itself, if George Soros shills for him stand up and say, let's take away guns, that's got to first pass through the convention by 2/3, which is a hurdle in and of itself. And then by that point, even if it did, get formally proposed, then it's just, in terms of practical politics, feet on the ground, Americans living their life, loving their heritage, knowing everything, about our high standard of living, our opportunities available to us. All these things in practical politics are not going to suddenly fall apart at the seams, and everyone's gonna.
And that percentage is even greater than you're actually saying. And here's why: because in the convention, it's not 2/3 of the delegates; it's 2/3 of the states, and so an even greater percentage of delegates, because you look at, states are going to have so many delegates or whatever. Really, you would have to convince even more than 2/3 of the delegates to get 2/3 of the states. So statistically, it's an even more insurmountable than just 3/4. And so we have to also take that into mind, because the rules of convention are the same as the rules in the House when it came to electing president. If the election were to go to the House, is while it takes a certain percentage, it's each state has one vote. So what, if California has 110 delegates and Rhode Island has 4, they still equal one vote when it comes to the proposal.
Can you imagine? Can you imagine being a delegate from Texas and going home after having voted for rescinding or repealing the Second Amendment?
There you go, right there. There's another example of how this dynamic operates. If number one, because we've never done it, and there's been all these fears floating around it, like it's a concept. And
I believe those fears are a total psyop, by the way. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. But as Bill Walker, he was a constitutional scholar. He was a constitutional scholar, Eagle Scout type guy. His life was really kind of dedicated to the Constitution and all the facts surrounding the Convention Clause. One of the great things he said is that the convention, everyone looks at the convention as a concept, but it's not. It's a process, and that's a big difference. And so, yeah. So I just what was I going to connect that to? That yes, in terms of practical politics, there's checks and balances through the process the whole way. And if you're talking rationally and logically, there's no way that 75% of Americans today are going to agree to something that would be detrimental to us.
All right, well, we're 25 minutes in talking about the Article 5 convention. We haven't read Article 5, so I think we ought to amend that real quickly. Play on words. Article 5, the fifth article in the U.S. Constitution. It's the only one we've never used. We'll talk about that. It says, the Congress, whenever 2/3 of both houses shall deem it necessary, shall propose amendments to this Constitution. Doug, why did I emphasize shall?
It is mandatory.
Non-discretional.
Yep. Or on the application of the legislatures of 2/3 of the several states shall call a convention for proposing amendments.
Now, for the shall there, we have the comma after Congress there at the first part. So you go from the Congress shall call a convention for proposing amendments. That's the reason why it's worded and punctuated the way it is. So what it's saying is that 2/3 of both houses or application legislatures of 2/3 of several states. And if they apply, in other words, they put out there, we want to do this, Congress doesn't have a choice constitutionally. They shall, mandatory, non-discretionary, as John says. It shall call a convention. And what does call a convention means? It means, and this is Congress's only job, set the time and date and place.
Yep.
And my biggest complaint in Article 5 is I would have gotten rid of that shall language, and I would have made an Article 5 convention mandatory every 10 years. Because again,
if I was to put it to a vote, I'd say every 20 years. I think well, maybe every 10 years would be the better idea. That but yeah, and if we get to a federal convention, we can propose that it's taken us this long and this big a fight against the moneyed interest in Congress. We finally got them to coerce the call, and now we're going to formally discuss it. So I think there would be a lot of delegates at a modern convention to saying that we should modify Article 5 itself.
James Madison, in one of his Federalist papers, and the number escapes me at the moment, he suggested a convention often, but not necessarily in Article 5, but a convention of the states to audit the federal government. And then he suggested that could lead to Article 5 if, there are things that are found unconstitutional by the states in convention. So understand what I'm getting at is convention of the states doesn't have to be just an Article 5 convention. The states have the authority and the right to hold a convention anytime they want for any reason. And if they want to do it just to audit federal actions and determine if federal actions are constitutional or not. Because, see, the courts are not the final arbiters of the Constitution. We, the people in the states, are. And the way to ensure that they're keeping that up, it's through convention. And then if there needs to be correction, then the Article 5 convention is put in place. And here's the thing. For the convention to audit, they don't need Congress to call it.
Well,
which is what.
Yeah, go ahead, Bray.
I was going to say, which is why Congress has worked for over 250 years to ensure that we never do convene. Anytime we get close to a popular amendment, they propose it themselves. The last thing that DC wants is for the states to start making decisions to take back their own sovereignty.
Well, this is a battle against rights, natural rights. It's the reason why you don't see the petition clause anymore, not since the 1830s, because it's a natural right that checks them. They don't want it. So it's been pushed aside. This is a natural right of the states. They have rights too. That's the reason we have a 10th Amendment, states' rights. And the states do have a right to convene a convention. And anytime that there could be a check against tyranny, they will do everything they can to quash it and hope that it not only is not in practice, but it's so out of practice that it becomes forgotten.
Right. And a little bit of pushback in the sense that in terms of, again, practical politics today, 2026, internet and all, and the coupling between the state government and the federal government and all the money in politics, in terms of practical politics, the state, you're never going to get the states today to be able to build consensus that they want to convene outside of the convention call itself. And so what I'm saying is that really, for this to work and for us to fundamentally alter the status quo that we know is going to reach an inevitable conclusion if we don't, the call has to come from Congress, because if you look at it, there's no way you're going to get 38 states or 2/3 of the states, 34 states today, to have all their attorney generals and all their governors say, yeah, we're gonna have a convention. Congress won't call it. We're going to have it ourselves. That, I mean, is that possible? We could miraculously somehow get 34 governors to sign off to send delegates to a convention outside the call? I mean, anything's possible, but that's a outlier. And so the
like
point
John,
I'm trying to make, the long point I'm trying to make is if we're going to save ourselves, the convention clause is our only option now because of the saturation of private money in both the state and federal government. And so if we're going to save ourselves, it's got to be through the convention clause. And the good news is, based on all the information I process, I believe we're at the tipping point right now. And why this term, the tipping point, or a tipping point, is important is because there's been a lot of studies, and there was a big book, or there was a well-known book about 10 years ago titled The Tipping Point. But the idea is, in any society, once you get a tipping point majority to become cognizant of the same thing, it automatically spills over into the population at large. And by that time, the Congress will say, we got to call it. And in fact, right in 2012, well, actually, let me tell you this, which is an interesting recent history, or not very old history. In 2010, that was the 110th Congress was sworn in. That was the so-called Tea Party Congress. A lot of people listening might remember that back in 2010, there was the Tea Party phenomena, and there were folks, getting in colonial dress and going down to the corner and just, raising awareness and spirit that, yeah, we're a republic, come on. And so in the 110th Congress, the first day, they had a bill sponsored by Goodlate from Virginia. And he said, we're going to read the Constitution from the floor of the House on the first day of Congress, because we're the Tea Party and we're going to get this right. Before they started reading the Constitution on that day, they said, we're going to read what the Congressional Research Service has told us to read, because there's been amendments, obviously, and there's parts in the Constitution that are no longer relevant. And so they said, we're going to read what the Congressional Research Service told us to read. And they skipped over Article 5. They didn't read it at all. I was watching C-SPAN that morning. And then 2 years later, the Congressional Research Service issued a 2-part white paper all about Article 5, including our group, Friends of the Article 5 Convention, including Convention of States, including Wolf Pack. So this white paper came out 2 years after the Congressional Research said not to read Article 5. And in the frontispiece of that white paper, it says explicitly, in this social media day and age, if enough Americans want this thing, we're going to have to call it. And right now, there's a resolution in the Judiciary Committee that if it goes to the floor for a vote and passes, it will issue the call forthwith, without delay. So the Congress has that in their back pocket. They know we're reaching a tipping point. Convention of States, I read all their bulletins. They have people, they have members in Convention of States in multiple states now. They're going door to door to share the idea of a convention and why it's not dangerous and why we really need to come together and figure out stuff. So the point here is we're at the tipping point right now, and it is growing. I guarantee there's someone right now, somewhere in America, sharing the idea of a convention, sharing the idea that the Runaway Convention is a myth. And so we're there right now. And so you know, if anything, if you're listening to this and you're maybe starting to change your mind a little bit about it, the first most important thing I would suggest is just read some of Bill Walker's work on Friends of the Article 5 Convention. That's FOAVC.org. And Brady will probably have a link there for you, but just simply becoming aware that this is real. This is, you know, the New York Times, since going back to the 1960s, has always told, and the LA Times and the Washington Post, they have told Americans to say, gosh, if we have this constitutional convention, everything's up for grabs. But the scholarship of the last 10 years shows conclusively, indisputably, that's untrue. And so if you're listening, or if you're listening to this at a later date, we are in the same moment that the folks were in 1776. We're in the same moment, but instead of having to grab a musket and run for a thicket of trees, you just have to become cognizant that, yes, we do have a right for a convention. Yes, this is our ultimate right of alter and abolish, handed down to us from the Declaration. And you can join the fight right now simply just by becoming informed about what we're actually talking about.
All right, let's get through this article. Thank you for that, John.
Yeah.
And I want to circle back to a couple of your points after we get through the actual article itself. So we said, shall call for a convention for proposing amendments, which in either case shall be valid to all intents and purposes as part of this Constitution. And here it is, when ratified by the legislatures of 3/4 of the several states or by conventions in 3/4 thereof. Why did they give us both of those options, Doug?
Well, what they the reason why is because the state legislatures, or by convention, was basically the voice, indirect voice of the people through the legislature, direct voice of the people through convention. And we see it in the 18th and 21st Amendment. In the 18th Amendment, Congress did, and right after that, go back to where you were.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to the 18th.
I want to first want to show people what I'm talking about here. So right after what you have highlighted, it says, as one or the other mode of ratification may be proposed by Congress. So now go to the 18th Amendment and what the Congress did. And I think this was because they felt this was a sure way for it to get approved. This article shall be inoperative, this is section 3, unless it shall have been ratified as amendment to the Constitution by the legislatures of the several states. Now go to 21. This article shall be inoperative unless it shall have been ratified as an amendment to the Constitution by conventions of the several states. These are examples of Congress determining. Now, here's the thing, and people have argued Well, then that means that Congress can determine how it's going to be ratified if the states hold a convention. That's not true. That's if it is Congress who proposed it, because that ratification means is going to be in the proposal. So in the case of an Article 5 convention, the states will make that decision. They will decide each if they do it by convention or if they do it by legislatures. And I've been hearing this argument by those who are against an Article 5. Well, Congress, they're going to make sure that it's ratified this or that way so they can control it. It has to be a part of it, has to be in the proposal. And it's only in the proposal if Congress does the proposition. Now, if the Article 5 convention, if the majority of the states say, hey, we want this amendment to be by, they could put it in the language, but ultimately, and if they wanted to, but ultimately, the plan, the reason why it was written the way it was for each state to decide for itself what would be the better method. And once again, it comes down to the voice of the indirect voice of the people through their state legislatures, or the direct voice of the people through convention. If they were to ratify by convention, the rules are the same. Each district would then have its delegates. Each district would have one vote, and it would run in a similar way as the Article 5 convention. But if it's done by the legislatures, which is the most common way that we see, then it'd go before the two legislative houses, or one in the case of Nebraska, and be either approved or not approved by that indirect voice. And the great thing about that is the way our legislatures are designed, or at least originally designed. There's been, and we can talk about Reynolds v. Sims some other time. It gave the rural voice also a voice.
Yeah,
in both cases.
And thanks, Doug. And to that point, here's another thing about a federal convention today, is that once we get there, once we enter into the formal discussion, in a natural progression of events, all these things that you guys have been talking about, for all these things are going to become known, right? There's only a certain amount of folks today, with the world spinning faster than ever, that have time to really lend their focus to this. But if the convention's called, now all of a sudden everyone who's turned off politics is now going to say, wait, what? Really? Okay, well, if we do this, what that means this, and that means this, and that means so. In a natural progression of events, the convention call itself brings us back to the Constitution, because in order to propose amendment, you got to look at what's already there, and then you look at what we need. And so
that's important. And that's important, because if the people don't know it, they don't understand the Constitution, but they want their delegates to understand it. Who are they going to choose? They're going to choose people like Warhamster, yourself, and myself. They're not going to be like, that person who's connected to all the money and politicians should go. They're not going to do that, because the people are, whoa, we're getting into the Constitution here. Right. I want someone who understands the Constitution. Those are the delegates who are going to get chosen.
Yeah. And to that point, not only in that natural progression of events, and this is, again, this to emphasize, the convention is not a one-shot concept where everything's just, we don't know what's going to happen. It is a process, and that process begins with the call, then the delegates, the selection or election of delegates. There are now many states that have already passed legislation saying, if we ever have this Article 5 convention, we are going to select our delegates. Other states have said, if we have this convention, we are going to elect our delegates. So right there, in that natural progression of events, you're going to get the states that are electing delegates, and those delegates are going to have to platform on what they promised to propose.
They're going to campaign for it. So they're going to campaign for it in their district.
Right. And so basically the election of delegates will be a mini referendum right there before the convention even gavels in. So this process, I just can't emphasize it enough. It is not a concept. It is a step-by-step process that will take weeks, if not months. and we will
And
deliberate, and we will mathematically build consensus, and the Constitution will deliver us from what we have going right now.
And
now,
and
John,
and in
John,
that
that
process,
segues perfect. John, let me get this in here, please. That segues into this perfectly. This sentence I've highlighted here, where they started later in some of the later amendments, they started putting time limits on it. So this 21st Amendment had to be ratified within 7 years. That gives a state 7 years to ratify. Let's say you get some Congress critters in your state legislature that are voting against the will of their people. You've got several election cycles to get someone in there who's going to approve a popular amendment. It isn't just a one-time vote. There is 7 years before most of these things expire. And it's pretty likely that 7-year language is going to continue. So that even adds to that process.
and it's going to influence now the vote of your Congress critters or legislative critters at the state level.
Exactly.
Now, what I was also going to say is when it comes to choosing the delegates, historically, the way it was done is congressional districts would choose their vote for their delegates to represent that district. In the case of electors, then also each house, each legislative house would choose their own elector. And so you may see that in some states where they would have people elect, and then the legislature would appoint 2 more, 1 for each house, perhaps. And it's up to how the states want to do it. It's their call. But historically, that's how it would be done. But my point is this, getting back to something I was saying earlier about the type of person is going to go. If this is a constitutional thing, you're going to have 2 groups. You're going to have people like us who are very constitutionally minded, and then you're going to have the opposition. And from what we've seen in the current atmosphere, while the opposition has a lot of voice out there in certain places, understand that these districts, and we could do them by counties or whatever, the type of people who are going to be sent are probably going to be more like a Douglas v. Gibbs or a Warhamster or John de Herrera than a Hassan Piker. We're seeing that there's a pushback against opposition. And so I'm a firm believer for those who, and I'm still kind of sticking with this runaway convention idea or the wrong people getting in there. I firmly believe that majority of the people want to be heard. They feel like they're not heard, and this will be their opportunity to put a person they trust from their community into the mix of things rather than a Hassan Piker. And also one more point I wanted to make is don't forget, listeners, if you look at the rules of conventions, office holders can't be a delegate. It has to be someone from the community. It has to be
they would have to resign their office and then be either selected or elected as a delegate. You can't hold 2 federal offices at once.
Right. Well, that's just rules convention. Any office holder, whether it be federal, mayor, or
state,
or whatever.
Well, actually, mayors could be delegates.
No, you cannot be an office holder. You go back to the convention rules during the ratification conventions. Nobody that held office, even local office, was allowed to be a delegate.
But this whole point, and I guess what I would say is that one of the beautiful things that we're talking about here is that there are many war hamsters, many Doug V. Gibbs, many John D. Herreras. There's many of us, Colonel Townsend, folks that should the call be issued, they will come into the breach. And, so that will be fun. This country is full of talented, intelligent people who have an understanding of how we got to where we're at, and so that will be one of the neat things. We will see modern day founders in the sense that they understand freedom, they understand what's a long train of abuse. They understand that the status quo has an inevitable conclusion, and it's not rocket science to figure out how to get us out of it.
All right, let's finish up this article because there's a couple of interesting things, and then I'm going to start. Let's get into some hypothetical possible amendments and why they would or would not be proposed or get through. But let's get through this. Provided that no amendment which may be made prior to the year 1808 shall in any manner affect the first and fourth clauses of the 9th section of the first article. Doug, you want to tell us why that's in there, that 1808 in the first and fourth clauses?
Well, that was to protect from a convention being used to reverse the plan to outlaw the Atlantic slave trade. They could not hold a convention to say, okay, we propose an amendment to reverse that. That was set in a sense set in stone. And for those who don't understand, you're talking. It's our Article 1, Section 9, if you want to go over there.
I can get there. Sorry if the scrolling makes you dizzy.
Yeah. Right there at the beginning. There you go. The migration or importation of such persons has any of the states now existing shall think proper to admit shall not be prohibited by the Congress prior to the year 1808, but a tax or duty may be imposed on such importation not exceeding $10 for each person. It also said the first and second clause. It also protects the writ of habeas corpus not being suspended. And
it was the fourth. Doug, it's the fourth.
Oh, I'm sorry, the fourth.
Yep.
Capitation.
Yeah,
and well, that gives you the importance of how much that was and how bad the 16th Amendment was. But anyway, get back to the Atlantic slave trade. This was to protect against the slave states or a majority trying to put in an amendment to reverse that. This was set in stone. And when it came to the first clause, the migration and importation of such persons, the Atlantic slave trade, for those who want to call the founding fathers, and particularly Thomas Jefferson, pro-slave, or that he was some type of racist, understand that law to outlaw the Atlantic slave trade in 1808 was proposed in Congress during the spring of 1807 and signed by President Jefferson in April of 1807 to be effective midnight, January 1st, 1808.
All right. The rest of this is just a no state without its consent shall be deprived of its equal suffrage in the Senate. It goes without saying. It's actually almost a little bit of a piggybacks on Article 4, Section 4.
Yeah, well, that last part, and that no state without its consent shall be deprived of its equal suffrage in the Senate. I believe that's the clause, that one, and there's one other in Article 1, Section 4, that basically makes the proposal of the 17th Amendment illegal. Because no state without its consent shall be deprived of its equal suffrage in the Senate. So any state that did not ratify the 17th Amendment cannot lose their consent, which is them sending their senators. So, and then in Article 1, Section 4.
Article 4, Section 4.
I'm sorry. No, I'm talking Article 1, Section 4.
Oh, well, I just wanted to piggyback when you said Article 4, Section 4 also addresses the 17th Amendment. It guarantees to every state in this union a Republican form of government.
Right, not a democratic form of government. And go to Article 1, Section 4 for me, please. And then in Article 1, Section 4, once again, this is just to help people understand how far we've gone here. So the times, places, and manner of holding elections for senators and representatives shall be prescribed in each state by the legislature thereof. That means handling elections belongs to states, but the Congress may at any time by law make or alter such regulations. The Save America Act would be something that falls under that, except as to the places of choosing senators. It puts it straight out that Congress cannot have any involvement in making law that would change how senators are chosen. Yet who proposed the 17th Amendment? Congress did. So my point based on that language is if the states through a convention wanted to propose something like 17th Amendment, they could. Congress could not.
All right, that brings up to the next section of this great conversation. We're all very familiar with our good friends at Convention of States Action, COSA. They put out a lot of great material, and they got a lot of really smart people. they have a they're basically trying to go the route of getting every single state, trying to get to 34 states to submit a petition. First question is, Doug, don't we already have 34 states?
Absolutely. We have 49 states have submitted petitions ever since the first one, as John de Herrera pointed out, from Virginia back in the 1790s. We've had over 750 applications. We did have 50 states at one time. Oklahoma had one, but they rescinded it. That's why it's at 49. So we don't need to wait.
Okay,
It's already
so
in play. They don't expire unless they say in the application that there's an expiration date.
Well, let me clarify a couple of things here. If you go to the Friends of the Article 5 Convention website, there you'll see two links. The website itself is a little antiquated looking, but all the information is there. The states satisfied the clause in 1917, I believe. And because the people wanted to vote for their senators, and they started beating the drum for a convention to the point that Congress coughed up the 17th Amendment that gave the direct vote for the senators. And there were a sufficient number of applications already cast at that point. But what Congress did and what the powers that be did at that time is, okay, here's your amendment, people, that you want. And then talk of a convention just faded. So we officially, we should have had our first call in the 19 teens. As far as rescinding applications, that's actually impossible. Rescinding an application is actually illegal, because once an application is cast to the Congress, it becomes a federal document, and you cannot remove federal documents from the record. So this idea that, oh, they, and we had the conclave at Harvard in 2011 that brought together like 400 people to talk about the convention, and which they're going to now have that second conclave October 2nd and 3rd at Harvard. So if you're near Massachusetts, you can attend the conclave they're going to have at Harvard on October 2nd and 3rd, which again is going to bring together lawyers, judges, scholars, political PAC people, think tank people, and they're all going to be talking about Article 5. But the idea that you can rescind an application, think about this. If the convention is for the people and there's no terms or conditions on the applications, then why would you want to create a stopple of the entire Constitution by quibbling like, is this application exactly worded like the other application? So the framers actually set it up, no terms or conditions, simply having been cast makes the application active. And so that's what I told Mark Meckler, the founder of COS, in 2011. We were right in front of the George Washington Hotel across from Harvard. And I said, look, dude, you're going to pass your application in a state legislature, and then 2 sessions later, they're going to rescind it. And you're just going to end up playing whack-a-mole. And that has proved to be true. The Convention of States folks, yes, it's great. They're drawing Americans into the tent to say, yes, folks, this is not dangerous. We got to do it. But they're also messaging that we just need another application. We just need one more. And so,
that's where one starts to wonder if there's a grift going on. Now,
there is.
Now, based on what you just said, though, then not that 49 or 50 is that big of a difference. Either way, convention is ready to roll. But what you're saying then is even though Oklahoma claims they rescinded that one, really there's 50 active applications in play.
Well, you know, and another interesting thing about that, if you do
50
read that,
states.
if you do read the essay by Bill Walker about rescissions being illegal, Congress, through all these rescissions, and I think the first rescission was Maine in 1959, for all these rescissions, Congress has never recognized them.
Mhm.
And Congress would have already made it like a ministry, you know, like a clerical thing to say, oh
Right.
yeah, no, Maine just rescinded, pulled that application. It would have already been done. So they have
Well,
never addressed any of the applications, period. And so
now,
they're all,
at this
yeah,
point, though, what I'm getting at is the discussion regarding rescissions, in a sense, is really just purely academic, because either way, we've got more than enough applications to
yeah.
hold a convention.
And you know, you know, the word self-evident, or the phrase self-evident, is in the Declaration of Independence.
Mhm.
And it is self-evident today that we need to come together. We need to formally build consensus. This country is a bunch of sovereigns who were given sovereignty in the Treaty of 1789, and where the monarchy in Europe said, "Yep, your sovereign states, your sovereign people." That still is alive today. And this is a really incredible opportunity for anyone who wants to join us to say we can do this, and we don't have to pick up a gun. All we have to do is, one, become educated as to exactly what we're talking about, and knowledgeable, to be able to share it with other Americans, to say it's not dangerous. No, are you afraid to discuss amendments with your fellow Americans? Everyone would be, I'm not afraid. No, I'll debate an amendment, sure. And if someone's got a good idea, I'll be right there to agree with them. So the first step is just get educated. Another great thing about the convention clause is, because partisan politics is so contentious today, talking about the convention clause sails right over all that partisan stuff. And you can just say, you know, there's folks saying we should have a convention. And if the default is the person parrots, oh, no, that's dangerous, just say, well, you know, that's actually not true. So anyways, this discussion below the surface and visibility of mainstream media and all the talking heads who never discuss it. We really do have an opportunity to authenticate ourselves and retrieve and revitalize everything that's been dormant for all these years. And so, that said, I see we've got like about 20 minutes left. That said, so yeah, educate yourself to know what we're talking about. Everything. Bill Walker, you know, rest in peace. Him and Tom Brennan both passed with COVID, but all the information's there. And if everything's connected, then indeed, just knowing the truth about this issue is step one. Step two is, if you have done well for yourself, I have been to a number of student conventions that have popped off over the last few years. Arizona State University did a student convention in May 2024. Florida State University did a student convention in March of this year. Washington University in St. Louis did a student convention in May of this year. And having sat on the floor of one of those conventions during deliberations, I thought, we have to document this. We have to document these young Americans going through the motions, so that the takeaway is, oh my gosh, we got to do this. So if you've done well for yourself, my contact information is on the Friends of the Article 5 Convention website, and we could make a documentary relatively inexpensively of an open convention call for students, and we would just instruct them, you're not here to rewrite the Constitution. You're just here to propose amendments that you think 7.5 out of 10 Americans would be interested in. So that's a really good idea to get us further towards the goal. And then finally, you guys probably know some outlets. I happen to be someone who's knowledgeable about this in a certain way, so I'm happy to share, go on any podcast or anything and continue to get this idea out there. And finally, the genius of the Constitution is that it provides for a peaceable way for us to deliver ourselves from tyranny.
All right. Well, you segued into the next thing I wanted to get to. We were talking about Convention of States actions. One of the things they say is that, we're going to put like these 3 specific proposed amendments, and that's the only thing that can be voted on in the convention. What say you, Doug? Is that true? Because I hold that once we get to the convention, everything's on the table, but the only thing that's going to get through are balanced, reasonable proposals that the 2 partisan sides can agree upon.
Yeah, I agree with that full-fledged. First of all, the Article 5 doesn't say anything about it being a particular application or only 1 allowed or only 3 allowed. It doesn't say that. Also, when it comes to just the rules of convention and throughout history, you're right. Pretty much anything could be on the table. Now, just because it's on the table doesn't mean it's going to get through the discussions and the filter of so many different voices. When you have that many delegates and it's only 1 vote per state, regardless of the number of delegates, and you're going to attract to a convention like that people who are going to be more constitutionally minded than others, you're only going to see the best float to the surface. And we've already seen through mock conventions, there are particular amendments that do float to the surface.
And one of those is something John and I are in very strong agreement on, and that's that both sides of the aisle want to get money out of politics. And I proposed an amendment about this going back as long as I've known Doug. Basically, and it wouldn't be that difficult. The way I think you do that is you say campaign contributions can't cross state or county lines, depending on the race. That's really important. The other thing I'd put to that would be only registered voters can contribute to political campaigns. And that polls over 75% on both the left and the right, these ideas of getting money out of politics. I'm sure John's got some versions of that.
It is, and this is another thing about folks viewing the convention process as a concept. If you look at the political polls for the last half century and before, everyone wants money out of politics because everyone knows money influences policy. It's just, and then, speaking of amendments, one I like to share, and you guys, I'm happy to go past an hour and a half, and maybe we should, because, I can continue talking, but when the convention's called, everyone is going to now start thinking in practical terms, like, okay, really what is possible here? What can, obtain 75+% approval? And right now, politically, term limits is the overriding no-brainer pet amendment. Now, I'm not saying I agree with that. I actually think that's a downstream amendment. I think there's upstream proposals and downstream proposals. The upstream proposals, like money in politics, that's going to make the downstream term limits proposal like moot. But the 2 things, I'm more radical than Brady in that I don't see any reason to have private money in the election process at all. I think elections should be publicly funded. I think if you reach or if you meet the criteria to run for office, you should just be allotted a page, a web page where you just state your platform. The election comes, maybe have a debate or two right before the election. But to have, dark money making campaign it's nonsense. There's no reason for it. There's other countries on this planet that have already recognized that, and public elections are publicly funded. And if you publicly fund public elections, the elected officials become public servants. So that is something that's fundamental and indisputable. The other amendment, which should give
hang
us,
on, John.
Yeah.
Let Doug address that one, because I think
Well,
John,
you can see me grinning, and I don't want to address that topic. I want to use what's going on for our discussion. Because I have a third point of view. I'm not going to get into it because then we wind up making this a debate over money and politics. But see, you've got 1, 2, 3 different views. When the founding fathers got together the Constitutional Convention, they knew what they wanted to accomplish. They didn't know how they're going to get there. I mean, Hassan Piker agrees with us that money should come out of politics. Abdul El Sayed agrees, but they have different ideas on how that can be done also. So that's where the convention comes in. That's where the debate comes in. And we get the war hamster and the John Day Herrera and the Douglas Gibbs and what other person out there, and they put their ideas on the table, and everybody listens to different ideas, and they battle it around, and they vote yay or nay, and then that might get reversed later. That's what a convention is. If you read Madison's notes, you learn they all, for the most part, had the same end goal for the most part. It was how to get there. That's what the convention, that's why convention is so important, because we can sit here, 3 of us, to debate this. It'll be a great video, us just debating money and politics, but it'd be best done on a convention floor where then, out of consensus, compromise, decisions, then a proposal is made.
Right, formally, right? Like this goes back to a point we made earlier, is that yes, we can have informal discussion, but it's the formal discussion. The thing that makes that discussion formal is Article 5. And once we get there, we will mathematically build consensus in that process. And that's it right there. That's all we need to do. In fact, Judge Tom Brennan, former Chief Justice for the state of Michigan and founder of the Cooley School of Law, co-founder of Friends of the Article 5 Convention, he said just the call itself, just the convention itself will be more significant than any amendment being proposed, because it will suddenly wake us all up that indeed, we're the people run the show here. And so that's what we want to achieve. That's where we want to get. And I think we're at the tipping point, if not over already. And it's growing right now as we speak. There are people talking about this right now. And so I think we're going to get it. I think we're going to reach the tipping point. This huge regionalized nation of gun owners and a heritage that says, "Don't tread on me." I think we're coming to it, and we really could hear about the call sooner than you think. Indeed,
if you're correct, John, and we get to a convention, I find a way to represent New Hampshire. One of the very first things I want to hear discussed is repealing the 16th and 17th Amendments.
Here.
That'll for sure be a premier debate in the convention, for sure.
Yeah, I'd also like some serious rewrites of the 14th Amendment, which is basically 3 amendments rolled into one. And
clarification, I think, is the right word.
Clarification, yeah.
Right. Yeah, and I think
that
Georgia's application from maybe the early 1800s basically said they want clarification on the 9th and 10th Amendments.
Yeah, it's interesting. The closest I think we ever came to a convention was 1968. That was for the Dirksen Amendment. Dirksen was a senator from Illinois, And he got 33 states up in arms about Reynolds v. Sims, which is my pet cause. Doug's totally on board with that as well. We came this close to getting that fixed. So I'd like to see that on the table too. Address the Reynolds v. Sims, and really put that to a vote. That would be a tough time to get passed by any state that's dominated by the big population centers. So it may take a court to overturn Reynolds v. Sims, but I certainly would like to discuss it. And Senator Dirksen got us this close to getting to that convention, and I was there during our lifetime. So
yeah,
and if you amend the Constitution, it doesn't matter what the courts say.
true.
Yeah, but going back to and I know the whole Dirksen narrative, and it's very interesting that Dirksen himself didn't look at the congressional records, and even at that time there were 2/3 of the states that already so that the Dirksen thing could have been like a high level kind of psyop to talk about it and then fail, and then everyone go back to their lives and say, oh well, we almost got there type thing.
Well, at least we tried, and then
and then a generation dies off, and then the new generation has to come back online to what this whole thing is, and so here we are now.
Well, and they don't know to look, and so it gets forgotten.
Right. No, that you really could make the argument that ever since the Constitution was ratified, it's been the unspoken spirit of the federal government that we'll talk about anything, but we're not talking about Article 5. And the whole
and the problem is we've adopted this idea that the Constitution is just guidance for the government. It's the law of the land. It's the supreme law of the land, and that means that Article 5 is the supreme law of the land.
Yeah, and that real quick there, people don't know this, but there are a lot of rights framed in the Constitution, but the ultimate right is the right to alter and abolish our government. That's what makes us who we are, that we can formally discuss our government. And
so Article 5 encompasses that. The entire First Amendment, your religious freedom, your ability to speak, freedom of speech, the press, assembly, petition. That's exactly what an Article 5 is.
Article 5,
First Amendment wrapped up into one.
Article 5 embodies the Declaration of Independence. Article 5 is the Declaration of Independence written into our high law.
Now, our Article 5, and you've heard me bring up petition quite a bit. Petitioning the government for redress grievances is something that we kind of stopped doing in the 1830s, and I want to bring it back. I believe it is important. But see, the petitioning the government for redress grievance then leads to something like in Article 5. If people are petitioning it and government is telling you, then what do you do next? You go into the Article 5.
Yeah. The way I like to describe it is the founding fathers gave us one tool and one tool only to claw back the federal government's power. And for some reason, the federal government's kept us from using it for over 200 and something years. We need to start using this because the government's it's not going to give back its power. Not once in history has the government given back something that's already taken. And it just continues to progressively get worse. And the terminal point, obviously, is a tyranny. And we're getting closer and closer to that as the national debt keeps expanding. And Congress, once they spend something, it never goes away. So we need an Article 5 convention. And that's why I say we should do one every 10 years. Because this national government, these Congress critters, Washington, D.C., cannot be trusted. They are bought off and paid for.
And so for us to actually get there, with the the empowerment of women, which I think is awesome. I really am the type that understands that it is important what's happened over the last 10 years. And so in terms of getting us a convention, we need women. We need women to talk about this.
Well, unfortunately,
And
John, there's a lot of people that want to repeal the 19th, and the women are never going to
well,
let us
again,
use
in
that.
terms of practical politics, our secular society today, that's, it's a non-starter. It's not going to happen. But I just wanted to impress upon you guys. It's her last name is Townsend or Townsend.
You're talking about Colonel Towner Watkins, the one I work with?
Yeah, Colonel Tower.
Colonel Towner hyphenated Watkins.
Towner. Okay,
Yeah.
so to me, she's a great candidate to lock on to this idea and start propagating it. Also, for people in the military, this Article 5 convention issue is not a political issue. It's a legal issue, and you're allowed to talk about it. The congressional records show conclusively the states have legally satisfied the clause, and Congress is failing to issue the call. So this is not a political issue. So I hope you guys can
John, what you're saying? Are you saying that we should be able to legally force Congress to uphold the shall part of that clause?
Well, the only way for us to enforce it is to have enough of us saying it's time for a convention. And that's what they said in the Congressional Research Service frontispiece. If enough Americans want this, we're going to have to call it. And I think we're there right now. I have seen a lot of curious movements, and even in the corporate media over the last 12 months, I've seen a number of articles that said, what would a constitutional convention look like? Now, to see those types of articles in mainstream corporate media, something's brewing behind, in the halls of power. And the fact that Harvard's going to have their conclave October 2nd and 3rd, that's going to be formative for sure. Again, if you are near Massachusetts, you should get down there. You should be there.
I probably will. I'm going to try to make it.
You should, Brady, for sure. That would be awesome. And we could.
Of course, I would nitpick the language. Constitutional convention. That's not what this is. It's an Article 5 convention. And there's a big difference. We had a constitutional convention. It was in 1787.
Right. No,
that's not what
we
we're
know
talking
that.
about.
But I just use the term now because
Well, that's what they use, and I know that, and that's where they get con from and all that. And it's inaccurate language. It is not a constitutional convention. It is an Article 5 convention. A constitutional convention is for rewriting or writing a new constitution. Article 5 is for amendments.
Simply for proposing amendments. And another thing I like to point out on that is the Article 5 convention is a proper noun. There's no other convention clause under Article 5. And so the Article 5 convention should be capitalized. And you'll see a lot of these groups, Convention of States being one of them, they don't capitalize convention for some reason, which I've always thought was very strange. Why not?
Yeah, I've seen that myself. Yeah, and being a writer, that kind of gets into my craw. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it is a proper noun, and I think we're going to get it. I really do. I mean, anything, if they do a false flag of some sort, if we really do get to that point, the tipping point, and they realize, oh my gosh, we got it. But if they don't, what I'm hoping now is because we do have a growing number of Americans saying yes to a convention, that they're going to be like, well, we don't want to bring the whole house of cards down. We better call it and take our chances. Otherwise, we're going to have a huge regionalized nation of gun owners that are going to stop obeying. So,
all right, John. So here we're on
Americans. Hang on just a sec. So Americans, though, here's the thing: they see a threat on the rise with the Democratic Socialists of America. What's going on? They see a threat rising, and so I do believe that looking for constitutional answers or responses that are not violent, something like an Article 5 convention, petitioning the government for redress grievances, things like that, is going to become more prevalent in the conversation because people don't take notice as long as everything's okay. Everything's not okay, and people are noticing.
So here we're on Article 5 or conventionofstates.com, and I typed in convention. They capitalize it in their own name, and they don't capitalize it when they call it convention. See if you have any more examples of that. Yeah, you're absolutely correct.
In titles they do, but yeah.
Yep.
So but again, that's having been on this issue for over a quarter century now, there's way more people talking about it than ever. It's not a fringe issue by any means. And if you are a Convention of States member, I'd like some Convention of States to, start propagating the idea within that organization that we don't need any more applications. We don't need any more. Let's pivot from that messaging that we just need to get Iowa to pass a resolution that,
Yeah, we're there. Let's do it.
Yeah.
All right, gentlemen. Anyone want to give any closing thoughts?
I just gave it. We're there. Let's do it.
Yeah. Here. Yeah.
And of course, folks, don't forget to visit me at my website, douglasvgibbs.com.
Yeah.
Very good.
But my concluding thought is, let's continue this conversation, right? This doesn't have to be a one-off. We can come back again and talk maybe a month later, two months later, or, of course, after you attend the October 2nd and 3rd conclave, Brady. That would be a great, I'd like to hear updates on that. I'm still hoping to get there myself. I am talking to Sam Fieldman later today. He is one of the principals in Wolfpack, and he's going to be speaking at that. So I am looking like it. So it's exciting to me, Brady, that you'll be able to attend. Get as many folks there, and this, I think this is a really great talk, and I want to thank you guys both so much for having this conversation. And it's not over. It's not over.
Yeah.
We're still
John, I want to ask you one more question because it's a question that's posed to me. In one of the chapters of my book, 5 Solutions to Save America, I spend the entire chapter on Article 5 Convention. And I have had at least a dozen readers after reading that book come to me and say, all right, I get it. So why haven't we had a convention? Why? And I know we just spent a whole show kind of getting into that, but in a nutshell, why haven't we? And what do you believe is the one thing we need to do to get over the hump?
The reason we have not had a convention is that the media for 50 years has led Americans to believe it's dangerous. That's why we haven't had one. And the Congress, they won't do something unless there's enough people saying they want it done. Now we're at that point.
Yeah, so we need to erase the fear. We have to address the fear in order to have it.
Right, which is what we did here today. We've dispelled why the runaway myth is a myth, and the other moving part on that idea is like, well, if it did run away to 75% saying let's do away with the Constitution, then we're shown right there that all right, I guess it's over.
Yeah, convention is the least of your worries at that point.
Yeah, right. So there's all that. So the truth is, we've never had the convention call because the people have been purposefully misinformed about what it is. But now they're coming online to what it is.
All right, very good, very good. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, my pleasure, guys.
Yeah, appreciate it. All right, everybody. Until next time, cheers.
Cheers.